Alright, this is episode E of Rakaia 1899, could be episode D. A couple of weeks ago I got to check out some national treasures, and if you keep watching you can check them out too. Cheers! At its most basic, a steam locomotive is a reasonably simple external combustion engine. It's a conglomeration of three parts: steam use in the cylinders, steam production in the firebox, boiler, smokebox system, and fuel and water storage, in this instance on the tender. And while all steam locomotives share those three elements, their ability to produce the sustained power and speed of the American U, for instance, depends on other factors such as their adhesive weight and tractive effort, as well as factors that influence operational availability, like the amount of fuel they can store or the amount of water that they can carry. Even the depth of the firebox, for instance, has a role to play in availability. And in order to understand how these elements of the American U contributed to the ease with which Charles Henry Carter was able to take the second picnic train from Ashburton to Rakaia and into the colony's worst railway disaster, it's necessary to understand locomotive development from the very British F class of 1873 to the very American U class of 1898, and how that locomotive development transformed the shoestring railway from a cheaply constructed low-speed railway to a cheaply constructed high-speed railway. We'll start with the adhesive weight of the F class of 1873 because that's a very good place to start. Adhesive weight is the extent to which the weight of a locomotive is carried by its driving wheels. And with the F class, the steam use, steam production, and fuel and water storage are all carried on the same frame and carried entirely by the driving wheels. So that means the combined weight of all of those elements is available for adhesion. Unlike Thomas, the F class is a very useful little engine. For their size, they can haul a respectable load, and for the modest diameter of their driving wheels, they could trundle along at a respectable speed. And because the F class was so useful for their size, a number have survived into preservation. This clip is from Ferrymead, and aside from illustrating the F class, it also shows the effectiveness of the Westinghouse continuous brake at low speeds. The reason why the F class is such a useful locomotive is that its designers managed to achieve a ratio between the adhesive weight and tractive effort that was above the 4:1 ratio that locomotive engineers aim for. I'll get to the specifics of tractive effort in a moment, but in the meantime it's the force exerted by the cylinders as experienced at the toe of the driving wheels where they bite into the railhead. It's the force that puts the train into motion and keeps the train in motion. And it's the force that allows the locomotive to haul its train up a hill, for instance. And as useful as they were for such a small locomotive, the F class is also limited by its modest size. There's no room for a leading truck or bogie to help with cornering, which are features of the subsequent K class and subsequent U class. And there's no room for a trailing wheel at the rear, which would allow for a deeper firebox, such as occurs on the K class and in the subsequent N class, which unfortunately Frank Roberts never modelled. The leading wheels assist the locomotive to maintain higher speed on curves, which is important for high-speed work on passenger trains. Also, practically for the F, there's the obvious limit in the amount of coal it could carry compared to later and subsequent classes of locomotives, and the amount of water it can carry similarly as compared to later classes. This sort of thing had an influence on how readily available a locomotive could be to haul traffic. Anyway, tractive effort is an equation that is the working pressure of the boiler in pounds per square inch, multiplied by the square of the bore of the cylinders, multiplied by the stroke of the cylinders, which is the distance that the piston moves out and back to dead centre for one stroke, in and back to dead centre for the next stroke. And the product of those factors is divided by the diameter of the driving wheels in inches, and then it's modified by a percentage that reflects the inherent inefficiencies in the system. In simple terms, tractive effort coupled with adhesive weight is the quantification of a locomotive's ability to get and keep its train in motion. Exploring the equation helps us to understand how steam locomotives work. And the easiest way to explore the equation is to follow the path that steam takes from its creation to it being exhausted. And steam creation on that fatal run to Rakaia started on the footplate with a fireman by the name of Francis Delamonte Mather shoveling coal into the firebox. From there, fire creates heat. That heat travels through the boiler tubes to the smoke box. On its way, it heats the water contained in the boiler barrel and in the jacket around the firebox. That water transforms to steam and is collected in the steam dome, and then transmitted by the steam pipe to the cylinders on each side of the locomotive. There, its entry and egress into the driving cylinders are controlled by the valve system, which we see here on Frank's model. Steam, by its expansive nature, seeks to occupy all the space that it's released into, and as it expands, it drives the piston forward, and then the steam is exhausted. More steam is introduced on the other side of the piston to drive it backwards, and the process repeats. The chemical energy in the steam is converted by the rod system to mechanical energy, which exerts against the drive pins here, here, and here, which in turn rotate the wheels, which in turn bite against the rails, which in turn gets the locomotive moving. So live steam acting against the face of the piston becomes mechanical energy, which becomes hauling ability where the tyre hits the road, so to speak. Because the larger the diameter of the driving wheels, the less the tractive effort of the locomotive. So if we go back to our F class with its rather modest diameter driving wheels, it produces its tractive effort more efficiently than the American U, but at the cost of being able to maintain a lower speed by comparison. So it's a trade-off, and it's important to note because it says something about the power of the locomotive that created or helped to create the collision at Rakaia, that two of the examples we see here are express passenger locomotives, and we can see through the diameter of their driving wheels that they are designed to haul passenger trains at high speed. But the thing about the American U is that even with its high-stepping driving wheels, it develops power so efficiently that it was considered a rival for dedicated freight locomotives. So the expression was that it ran like an N and pulled like a B. Now that's relatively meaningless for anyone not familiar with the alphabet soup of New Zealand's locomotive development and classification, but the B class was the very latest freight locomotive available in 1899. And the N class had a long established reputation for being very good high-speed runners. An N locomotive held for a time the speed record on the 3-foot 6-inch gauge, and it obtained a speed in excess of 65 miles per hour, which is a much more significant speed than the train which I caught this morning achieved. The Baldwin-built American U could do better than that, and that may well have been part of the problem, because braking becomes more efficient as speed drops, and the inverse is also true. The higher the speed, the less efficient the braking system. U284 entered traffic about 3 months before Rakaia, 1899. Initially, because of their pulling power and because the B class were rolling off the production line at Addington in dribs and drabs, the class actually hauled freight on the challenging section north of Dunedin, as well as up the Weka Pass to Culverden, two of the toughest assignments on the Hurunui Bluff section of railway. So when U284 backed on and coupled up to the second picnic train on the morning of the 11th of March 1899, it was entirely possible that it was the first time it and its crew had been assigned to a passenger train. And that line about running like an N does a disservice to the American U, because it developed 50% more power than the N class. So with a load of somewhere around the 200-ton mark on its drawbar, U284 would have gotten its second picnic train into motion in a doddle, and it would have faced no particular difficulty and hauling that train up to Drumore in Chertsey, and then bringing it down the other side into Rakaia. Stopping it all, of course, proved to be the challenge, and as I said back in episode B about higher traffic demands that require heavier loads hauled at faster speeds on the one hand, well, that's what we've covered today, the ability of these locomotives to haul heavier loads at faster speeds. And I'll look at the negligible or even negligent investment in the braking systems and signalling systems on the shoestring railway in a subsequent episode. Anyway, back to Charles Henry Carter and that minute or two after 7 on that horrible, wet, windy, rainy Saturday night in March of 1899, when he needed, in the face of that red lamp, to rein in all of the kinetic energy that U284 had built up on its high-speed run from Ashburton. He lacked the time, the space, and the tools to do so. And that weight of traffic demands, that weight of poor braking systems and signalling systems, the weight of the dead and injured from the broken shoestring in the wake of the colony's worst railway disaster, all of that institutional weight had to fall somewhere or on someone, and it fell on the shoulders of Charles Henry Carter. Like, subscribe, enjoy, don't enjoy, see yourself.